Hello and welcome everyone to Insights. I'm Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. It is always a delight to be here.
On this episode, we will be looking at Nigeria's potential to transition from an economically dependent oil-based state to a diversified, innovation-driven economy, one capable of achieving the 500 trillion naira budget by 2026 or at most in 2030. We'll also examine the imperatives sustaining the National Youth Service Corps Scheme, NYSC, and the debates on extending its duration to 2 years. Elizabeth?
We'll also be shifting our attention to a very important aspect of agriculture, which is fishery. We'll be looking at challenges and the benefits, and of course, the youths, how they can benefit civil servants and retirees.
Very well then, let's kickstart the program.
Whatever the issues are,
the National Assembly is constitutionally empowered to scrutinize,
however complex or intricate.
We have involved all the academia, the members of the academia. We have involved the academies.
Be it government's policies or in fact any issue of public concern.
Our job is to help you gain clarity and make sense of it all.
This is not really healthy for our democracy.
There's a lot of aggrievance in terms of who has been in power longest and who becomes the governor of the state.
It's also in the quality of food being consumed.
After all, perception is insight.
And gaining understanding is also getting insight.
Now moving on with global trade dynamics shifting, oil prices fluctuating and other national economic indicators yet to perform at their optimal best. The speculations and predictions of Nigeria clinching a 500 trillion budget just a year from now seems quite incredulous. But is it really? Can Nigeria achieve a 5 trillion naira budget by 2026, or should I say 2030, through innovation and efficiency? Well, the former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Dr. Lise Agbakoba, SAN, has been making these predictions while profiling what he termed or has termed a transformative strategy towards achieving a 500 trillion budget by 2026 or 2020. I'm not clear which one or which year he means. Well, he isn't my guest on Insight today, but he has definitely left us plenty to ponder. And my guest and I will be talking about some of the issues. My guest is Professor Ken Ife, Professor of Development Economist. Welcome to Insight, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us on such a short notice. Prof, I must say a 500 trillion naira budget 2026 is a bold vision, but we must tell ourselves some half-truth. Considering how it is that our economy is still exposed to global oil price volatility, there are also the struggles that we have on the infrastructural front, whether it is power, whether it is transport, or even the ports, our ports. Well, since I'm talking about challenges, maybe I should also mention the issue of corruption, public perception, public trust. And then there is unemployment. These are mostly issues that the federal and state governments are working around towards resolving, of course, with the private sector playing a major and key part as well. But I want us to talk about opportunities, Prof, and how institutional reforms can transform opportunities into strategies. And I reckon the question is this: are there pathways to achieving a 500 trillion naira economy in 2026 or even 2030 as predicted by some persons or some groups, considering our current situation? Naturally, there's bound to be skepticism about Nigeria's institutional capacity to execute such a leap. But what are your thoughts overall, Prof?
Well, I'm not sure whether the 500 trillion you are mentioning is referring to 500 trillion budget for the
budget, as a matter of fact, budget.
Or 500 trillion GDP. We've already exceeded 500 trillion GDP. When you look budget, is he referring to 500 trillion for federal government and all the state governments, that kind of figure, focusing on federal government? There is a pathway, a very tough pathway to get to tenfold increase, but not in a year. But he actually said, from what I read, 2030 rather than 2026. What I read was saying 2030. If you're looking at 2030, of course, there could be a pathway, but that pathway will be a very rough road to travel because you have to unleash all the things holding us down. And then not only, you know what that means? It means that you have to look at government revenue going up to 400 trillion so that you can borrow 100 trillion to make it up to 500 trillion. You know what I mean?
Considering
So
where
the
we are
question
right
is
now,
this,
Prof,
what is
that's
the
also,
pathway?
considering where we are right now, that's almost a 1,700% leap from where we are right now.
Oh yes. Oh yes. But I have to, be devil's advocate. It asked me for pathways.
Yes.
One pathway is to just go away and print 400 trillion naira. Already we have printed 33 trillion and we are suffering it. You can print that so that you can on paper say that you've got a budget of 500 trillion because you've already printed 400 trillion. So that's one, that's being a devil's advocate. The second one is that he was looking at both government revenue and governance related efficiencies to bring us to that track. On the government revenue, you have to be looking at two aspects of government revenue: optimizing current revenues, and then, of course, getting to bear on the government assets. Because I do know that if many of the government assets, if we shift to asset-based financing from debt-based financing, we can unlock huge hundreds of trillions of naira assets that are moribund. There are thousands of assets that federal government ventured into, industrial ventures and all of that. And even NNPC, for example, if we were to go to market with NNPC and then put about 50% of it up for grabs, then you can attract substantial money from there. But let me tell you an example. Saudi Arabia wanted $25 billion, being many times richer than Nigeria. What they did was to say, okay, tell me the valuation on Saudi Aramco, their own oil company, which is equivalent to NNPC. In 2018, they got the valuation at 1.5 trillion. Then he said, I didn't know I have this kind of money. Oh yeah, 5% to the capital market. And then 2 years after, they revalued again. The value has gone from 1.5 trillion to 2.3 trillion. Now, what it tells you is that when you bring in private sector to invest in your money, in your assets, just like you have LNG, where government is partnering with 3 big oil majors, we're getting money from there because they know the business. There's no wool being pulled over anybody's face, and we're getting dividend. If you do the same thing in NNPC, the big boys will come in, the small boys will come in, the Niger Delta remittance will buy share, all of us will buy share in it, and then it will come to serious public scrutiny, and corporate governance will sit well. They will begin to take important decisions. The decision number one may say, look, get out of refinery, sell the refinery business, and businesses will take it over and they'll start operating like Dangote. They may say, okay, why are you holding 150 marginal oil fields? Sell them, get people in there. Modular refineries will get the impetus to do. They may also say, oh, let's have some reserves. Let's build 3 different reserves in different locations so that the modular refiners can access crude, and then we can have a lot of crude. When our quota is down, we can supplement. These are strategic decisions. Just like Saudi Arabia and America have huge reserves. So there are decisions that can be taken. And then, the other decision is that, look, you've got an investor in your country that invested $20 billion. Dangote. Now, let us have a massive policy of wrapping around his investment 100 trillion MSME clusters around that Lekki that will deal with all his downstream, midstream investment, producing plastics, rubber tires, anything and everything. We are heading out to $100 billion investment ecosystem around that 20 billion. This is where you begin to talk about how you can generate the kind of revenue you are mentioning. You can't get this revenue by giving palliatives. I've seen a lot of palliatives there. That's not where you're going to get money. What you're going to do is I accept that free education and free health services is investment in human capital. It's either you are investing in a material resource or capital infrastructure and the productive capacity, or you're investing in capital. Human capital investment is allowed by the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, which means education, health, and employment. It doesn't tell you to go and give money and share money to people. So that's not where you invest. If you want to invest in populist investment, then go to the 42 million MSMEs in Nigeria and say, what incentive can I give you to employ one more person? If the 42 million employ one person, you've created employment for 42 million Nigerians extra. That's where you take policy to. Then you see a sudden escalation in the number of people employed. It's not palliative. It doesn't create any job. It ties the capital that you should have directed into energizing the MSME community to grow.
And I reckon, Prof, I reckon here that you're talking somewhat about inclusive growth. Inclusive growth. And earlier on, I referenced institutional reforms. Prof, I'd like to mention some areas that I consider quite germane that I would think that, yes, we have somewhat of a comparative advantage of human capital base, our human capital base. In fact, as a matter of fact, it is said that 70% of our population is under 30, and that's a massive advantage. There's also the issue of natural resources. I mean, it's abundant here in Nigeria, and that's another area I would think we have comparative advantage. And then our market size, and then there are partnerships like NEFTA and other partnership agreements that we sign. Prof, my question is, how can, putting all of this together, and not forgetting the Trump tariff, in fact, that's a new, do I call it a spanner in the mix now, but that has just been dropped there in the mix. Putting all of this together, how can institutional reforms, engender the kind of inclusive growth that you've alluded to already? Now that we're building tall dreams and big dreams and talking about $1 trillion economy, ₦1 trillion economy, budget rather, and $1 trillion economy, how can institutional reforms engender the kind of inclusive growth, especially taking into cognizance some of these areas that I referenced and mentioned earlier?
Yeah, whatever you say, if you are going to achieve growth in an economy, you have to plan to increase the tempo of economic activities, because it is the economic activities that create the employment. You cannot have economic activity if there's no investment. So the first and foremost is investment coming in. Some of this investment appears to be borrowing, and there is a law around borrowing which you call Fiscal Responsibility 2007 that says you can borrow for long term, for capital expenditure or human resource development, and must carry out cost-benefit analysis and all of that. All of those requirements are not actually being met, but this is a way of borrowing for investment. But there are private sector investment that's more critical, and that's why I brought your idea down to 42 million MSMEs. What do you give to them as incentive? How do you encourage them to borrow money? How do you encourage them to invest? And where do you direct their investment? If it is one person, one job, you can get 42 million jobs. Now, there are MSMEs. You have to focus them to the productive capacity area that you want to develop. You mentioned agro-industrial. Yes. Since you have farmers producing food, direct those 42 million to be able to act and add value to those so that you can deal with your import dependency and get it out of the way. And then, of course, that's where you are talking about import substitution and import. So that is that. But of course, you can also corner it to other mineral resources like oil, gas. That's why I said Dangote has come in here, create an aggregate around him, and then focus on downstream and midstream investment. So you have petrochemicals, and there will be an explosion of companies. Over 5,000 companies that will work in that ecosystem and create the investment to about $100 billion. Now, you also move to human capital. Human capital is where you are talking about 3 million young people going to be trained in ICT that can now stay in Nigeria and be doing jobs abroad. Now, that is human capital that you are exploding. You are unleashing the human capital. India did this in 1960s, where they committed to 250,000 engineers being produced and scientists and computer people. From the 60s, India, and that resulted to surplus of manpower. In 1974, India has about 500,000 Indian teachers were teaching in Nigeria. But as soon as foreign exchange started drying up, they went back. China is training 3.5 million graduates in STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and money. This 3.5 million is more than the whole graduates in America, 2,600 American universities, all of them put together. And that's what China is spending just on STEM graduates. So if you don't invest in that area, then it will be a tragedy, because all these remittances you are getting, $20 billion, you won't be getting them. So that's why it's important to address that. So I've mentioned 3 core areas where you can direct investment that will transform the space. But there are policy reforms that are helping. For example, the current policy reform on a fiscal policy is actually trying to raise the threshold for those 42 million MSMEs instead of from 25 million to 50 million. In fact, they even want to go to 100 million naira turnover before you start harassing them. What you are doing with that policy is that you are leaving more disposable income to those people so that they can employ more jobs, they can create more, reinvest. And then the same policy has gone to the household people to say, remove all this VAT on what they consume, remove it in education and health and all these things and food. You are now trying to make the people who get little money, 70,000 naira a month and all that, hold more money in their hand, which means more disposable income, and they can buy more things, increase aggregate output, aggregate consumption. Aggregate consumption increases GDP. Then the MSME's aggregate output increases GDP. So we can see how policy reform is going to move the entire base upwards. So that is possible. So I've given you 4 things that are working in tandem. But you also have other ones. There are many other ones. You have to cut your coat according to your size, which is the area that he talks about governance. And then in the case of governance, it is about trimming down the bureaucracy, and then about making sure that all the waste in government, and the waste are horrendous, to cut down on the waste. And there are many ways. You can start with the judiciary, not judiciary, with the House of Rep and House of the Senate and all of that. But at the end of the day, there are mammoth waste in the bureaucracy that could do well in refocusing our efforts to ensure that. But above all of this is energy. You can't industrialize without energy. There's nothing you can do. You can't enjoy your life without energy. So this energy thing has been one tool that has been used against us to perpetuate our import dependence, because they know that the moment we have enough energy, then we have more entrepreneurs in the continent, in Nigeria. Nigeria has 42 million entrepreneurs in Africa, compared to 90 million MSMEs in Africa. So we have 48%, which is 3 times more than our population, which is 3 times more than our GDP compared to the continent. So it's an area of massive competitive advantage. So the part is, how do we make sure? How do we make sure that you factor them? If power is not there, that massive number won't help. So that's why the power must be paramount. And the opportunity we have now to invest on gas, energy, all this other energy, and solar and all of that, remove all these tax from these things so that people can feel free to invest in them. You may have 3 houses, one in your village, one in Abuja here where you are playing, and one in the capital of your state. But you cannot sleep in the 3 of them at any one time. So if you have solar in all the 3, so solar will be earning you money in the 2 where you are not sleeping. So let's have power to the mass markets so that people can invest in them.
Probably you said so much, and there's so much to unbundle from all that you've said. I think this would be a good place to to end our conversation for now, the situation is quite fluid. I mean, it's the economy after all. And there are new things, coming into the mix, even as we appraise and x-ray developments and events. Professor Kenny Faye, I'd like to thank you so much. Development economist, I should say. I'd like to thank you so much for coming on the program. It's been a pleasure and delight listening to you analyze the situation, as it were. Like we did say at the beginning of this conversation, the 500 trillion naira budget is just a prediction by the former president of the NBA, Dr. Olisa Agbakuba, SAN. So it's a bold dream. We'll see. It intends to address the press and policymakers on what it termed reformative strategies towards achieving this. We're looking forward to seeing what it unfolds, and then, of course, we will bring you back into the studio and analyze some of these recommendations. Thank you so much, Professor Ife, for coming on our program. It's been a delight having you here.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure. Thank you.
Moving on now, the National Youth Service Corps NYSC scheme was established in 1973 by Decree number 24 under former military head of state General Yakubu Gowon. Essentially, it was aimed to foster national unity and reconciliation post-Nigerian civil war, and continues to do so as a special purpose vehicle towards engendering social integration and unity, of course, especially amongst the nation's youth. NYSC attempts to integrate young graduates from diverse backgrounds by deploying them to states outside their origin for 1 year. Recently, the Minister of Education, Olatunji Alausa, called for an extension of the NYSC scheme from 1 year to 2 years. He says the extension will allow corps members to gain more substantial skills and experiences. But the real question is, does this iconic program still hold the DNA of national cohesion? Or has it become a relic of symbolic gestures? Now, let me bring in my guest, Dr. Augustine Ikechukwu Ogagwa, Associate Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Lagos, Akoka, Lagos. He and I will be discussing this issue. Doc, thank you so much for joining me on Insight. How is Lagos today?
Lagos is okay. That's always the heartbeat of the nation.
Fantastic. I see you looking agile. That means you're also reflecting the mood of Lagos. Doc, let me just get right into it. As one who has myself participated in this compulsory national service, I can definitely relate with the experience of living and working with other young people from other tribes and regions. And of course, there's also the larger experience of integration within a community, almost completely different from mine. That was my experience. So in many ways, when you juxtapose NYSC's integration gains against ethnic pluralization or, pluralization in Nigeria, you see some gains. I can cite examples. There's a colleague of mine, if you watch the NTA, you probably know her, Claire Adelabu Abdurazak. It's a very popular story how she met her husband. That was during her NYSC year. In fact, they met at camp, and more than 4 decades later, they are still there. I mean, it shows the cross-cultural linkages formed during this service year. But yet, there are questions and there are concerns, Doc. I talked about the cross-cultural encounters already that happens during the service year. I want to know, does this cross-cultural experience during this service year, does it statistically more significant in altering lifelong prejudices? Or do post-service realities, things that come after, or that that you see and experience after your service year, like job discrimination, like some of the political rhetorics that we hear, do they erase some of the gains gained during the NYSC?
Well, to a reasonable extent, I'm really enthused and highly captivated by the theme of your discussion. And to a reasonable extent, I will tell you that this kind of discourse is actually what the nation needs at this point, where it seems to be grappling with a lot of issues that puts it in a kind of crossroads, as it has to do with the issues of national cohesion, integration, accommodation, and the tolerance of various diverse groups across the Nigerian geopolitical zone. Whether we like it or not, the potpourri of our diversity in its negative connotations seems to be coming to the fore more than it has ever been in recent time. And
True.
It is our business to actually make kind of record to what you are doing now. That there was a time when people thought in this line of fostering national cohesion, of trying to work towards harmonious intergroup relations, trying to actually establish a sense of mechanical solidarity that will make Nigerians see themselves as one. And to a reasonable extent, I give kudos to the military leaders of that time who actually envisioned this idea and tried to put it not just in proper perspective, but in actual engagement as it has to do with cross-cultural integration of Nigerians across board. You made reference to, what do you call it now? A couple that made themselves during National Youth Service.
My very good colleague here, Claire Adelabu Abdurazak, one of the many stories, of course, intercultural marriages arising from, their chance meeting at the NYSC.
In 1998, when I got into the University of Lagos, I left the corporate world to come and have a stint with the postgraduate experience. Then, there we had this set of human beings. That lady, as far as I was concerned then, all about her was Mama Ngozi. So, when an issue arose, they were coming to me to coach them, and at any point in time, even, tracing my home at Antony Village, Odolami Street there, how they found it, I never got to know, but the enthusiasm and the drive with which they actually pursued me, coached them on this, coached them that, the most popular among them was the lady called Mama Ngozi. Then, something happened and I was looking for this Mama Ngozi, and I was asking one colleague, or describing her. This my colleague now mentioned one other name. I said, no, the name you are mentioning is Yoruba name. The person I have in mind is an Igbo lady because she's popularly called Mama Ngozi.
Mama Ngozi.
We communicated. So we kept on juggling until somebody now came up to make us understand that the Mama Ngozi I was talking about was the same person, maybe mentioned as a Yoruba lady. I said, if she's a Yoruba lady, why is she popular with that name, Mama Ngozi? Everyone knows her as Mama Ngozi. And eventually they located her and she came, she happened to be the same thing, the same person. I had to confront her with that. I say, you really set me on a kind of a merry-go-round spot for you. Because I was looking for an Igbo lady only for these people to make me understand that the person I've been relating with in the past 6 months is a Yoruba lady and I never got to know. She said, sir, it's a very long story. I said, what's a long story? It has to do with NYSC.
You see?
That when she was sent to the East, this is somebody that had never left the confines of Lagos, talk less of having anything to do with the East. That there was a declaration of fasting and praying, right? Fasting and prayers in their homes, casting and binding, that whatever spirit I sending her to the East, God will help them to break it. Pastors were engaged. The father was somebody who was well connected. So he had cause to go to NYSC that the daughter cannot cross Ore, talk less of going to the East. The thing happened for almost 2 weeks. She was almost 1 week late to NYSC. I just want to use this to encapsulate what you're talking about, and then we
exactly.
So
and it buttresses
so much interrogation that their pastor even now told the father that this is the hand of God. There is nothing they can do about it. Before the child loses that opportunity, she should just go. And that was how she found herself going to Enugu State precisely. That they got to Enugu very late, past 9 in the night. Everyone, disappeared. She was left alone in the park until one man came back. As I was in December, he said yes. Said that she was looking for a vehicle, going to, is it somewhere after Abuja or store? The man said, you can't get any vehicle. What happens is that you follow me to my house. He said, well, she knew she was already dead. So it's better she should die in somebody's house than to die in the field. Life experience. and masters this experience in University of Lagos. So she followed the man. The man, when they got to their home, they had to vacate, himself and the wife vacated their matrimonial home, made her very comfortable, everything intact. The following day, the man took cars personally to NYSC camp, reported that that lady was his daughter. The camp commander took note of that. To cut the story short, he was treated as the daughter of a very prominent Enugu man, and everyone gave her the respect she deserved until she eventually found herself in her primary area in assignment. Yes. But the greater part of it was that this man did not only follow her to that place to introduce her to the community, that she did not spend one kobo of her NYSC allowances. Because members of the community where she now got accommodations, they were rotating it among themselves. Somebody took responsibility for breakfast, another for lunch, another for dinner. And that was how everything got on. Finally, it was in this process when they met on this Thursday program they used to, do during NYSC weekdays.
Yes.
Now ran into a Bini colleague who was also narrating his experience that he never wanted to have anything to do with the East. But this was his experience. She also narrated her own. That was how they got to meet each other as husband and wife. That was how their first who adopted her as the daughter. And subsequently, two of the other children were also bearing Igbo names. It's a mark of integration. It's a mark of solidarity. It's a mark of tolerance. This is a mark of bonding, which this nation lacks today, and which we need in every bit of sense of it for it to be integrated. Use that word DNA. Nigeria doesn't have it. And we have to go back at a point in the history of America. They were talking about going back to their old faith. Nigerians had that vision and mission of reconciliation, reconstruction, and rehabilitation immediately after the Civil War.
Doc, let me jump in here, Doc.
I think we are lacking it. We need to go back to that philosophy.
Fantastic. And I really must thank you for the story. I mean, it's created the background that we need in this discourse. And it's not the rationale for the creation of the NYSC that is in dispute here. Do you think post-NYSC experiences are significantly enough to...
Whether NYSC erode some of those expectations, right?
Perfect. That's it.
Fantastic.
That's my question to
you. Let me come in at the level of the nature and character of our political class of today. Under the military, unfortunately or fortunately, people like us, we are some of the ones that we are in the forefront, fighting against military rule and dictatorial tendencies and all what negative connotations militarism connoted in the Nigerian geopolitical space. But it's sad to see that today, with what we are seeing, with the nature and character of our political class, it is a sad thing that we go into certain circles and some people are now talking nostalgically about the era of the military. By God's grace, we will never get to that level again. But let me tell you, under the military, the experience of the NYSC was more encompassing, it was more impactful, it was transparent, and it was, to a reasonable extent, achieving its goals. Because I want to anchor this discussion on your linkage to the issue of what we call post-NYSC experiences.
That's
so that thing you had your own experience. I also had my own experience as a youth corper. Today, when I talk about homes, if I finish talking about my home in Imo State, my hometown, I talk about Ayetoro with nostalgia within the hinterlands of Ogun State. Because an experience I had during my orientation days at Ayetoro before I was finally deployed to serve at Makuka School, Shagam. I just had to make that observation that yes, as peace corpers, it's something that happened in the past too. Even the Bible will tell you that let no person hold you to ransom with regards to your experiences as a youth. One of those days we lost our way into the thick forest of Ayetoro. Somewhere along the line, I and two of my other colleagues, we ran into some hunters or two. We're not asking them about our way back to the camp. They told us we are over 2 hours away from where we started from, how we sneaked out of the camp and so whatnot. It was a very wonderful experience that we should follow them. Just like the story of Ngozi, I and my colleague, we said, well, it's better we die in the hands of human beings than to be devoured by wild beasts. We followed these people to their camp. They fed us with fresh, what do you call it now? Bush meat. They also
palm wine. Was that palm wine?
Gave us palm wine, all those kind of things. When we finished, they now asked us to enter this truck they call Abuja or something of that nature. That's what they used to carry us back to the camp. And we now knew that we were really lost. That experience and subsequent engagement made me to hold Ayetoro in high esteem up to today. When I now served at Shagam became another third home to me. Now second home in Yoruba land. That's why when my child of barely 9 years mistakenly was taken to a place they call a Falai for secondary school, my Yoruba neighbors resisted it. That the Abola, because that's the name they gave to her. These are experiences I gained as a youth corper, that they will never allow that to happen. I told them about my experience of the average Yoruba person, different from what we see in Lagos. That's any part of Yoruba land that my child can go and survive. First one has gone, finished university today. Second one is in Hafanaye from the same school. The third one is rounding up at the STEM 4 in Ekiti State. That is the experiences some of us garnered from NYS. Now, if you take it back to the Nigerian classical geopolitical space and what it connotes to us today, you begin to wonder, where is the source of hate and anger Nigerians hold against themselves? It has to do with this kill or be killed attitude of winner takes it all in politics.
Is it therefore your submission that while extending the NYSC to 2 years could amplify its benefits, and successes, of course, considering that we might need to address financial security and structural challenges, and we can also glean from the global models, and reform, the scheme into a more impactful, more youth-centric program, reinforcing national unity and meeting national development needs. Is that the summation of your thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, right. The vision and mission of NYSC was very laudable. And more importantly for me, it has to do with the issue of not just cohesiveness, but integration, bearing from the very 3 hours conceptualized immediately after the Civil War, from point of view of reconciliation, importantly, reconstruction and rehabilitation. But most important aspect of it is from point of view of reconciliation. It is noteworthy and very, very instructive what we are having in Rwanda today, barely 15 years after their very terrible experience of near total disintegration. But from point of view of frankness of thought and sincerity of purpose, see where Rwandans have gotten themselves to today. And the world is actually taking note because there was transparency and sincerity in what Rwandans set out to achieve for themselves. The issue besetting and boggling the stability and growth of Nigeria today has a lot to do. What I did in my classes in intergroup relations and political sociology is a weak sense of citizenship and poor attitude towards nationalism and patriotism. In this sense, as far as I'm concerned, nothing is too much. No investment will be too much for us to achieve that. If at the level of now extending NYSC to 2 years, will not necessarily it will totally achieve that for us, but at least it will take us a step forward.
Well, we've been battling with the connections there with Dr. Agugwa for some time. Would like to sign him off at this point and thank him very much for joining us on Insight. Hopefully, we will be able to get him to come on the program some other time as we pursue this line of conversation. We have been speaking with Dr. Augustine Okechukwu Ogugwa, Associate Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Lagos, Akoka, Lagos. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us on the program. Elizabeth Omori is up next.
Agriculture and youth are closely linked as the future of agriculture depends on the involvement and engagement of young people. The world's population is projected to reach 9.7 billion by 2050, and youths will play crucial roles in ensuring global food security. Youth involvement in agriculture, economists say, can contribute to rural development, reducing poverty and improving livelihoods. Young people are more likely to adopt new technologies and innovative practices, driving agricultural progress and sustainability. How do we drive this vision to ensure food security? Our focus on this segment, and Dr. Adetunji Samuel Adebanjo, CEO Dr. Fish, will speak to us. Thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, I'd like to find out from you, as a Nigerian youth, why did you embrace agriculture?
Indeed, a big story. Just like I usually say, when I came to Plateau to serve as a copper, that's 204, 205, I embraced the business called aquaculture, which is my secondary options. My main study there in school was business. I studied in school, and along the line, as a business creator, I had to venture into something to make me more creative. And luckily, when I served in Plateau State, then when Dario was there, I was able to capture the business to let people see there is future in fish farming. A lot of people embrace that. That is business in Nigeria. I was so happy when I heard there's a ministry for livestock. His Excellency, the President of Nigeria, I'm so happy about this that I saw that, look, we need to open more channels for business for Nigerian youth to see there's wealth in agriculture. There is money in Nigeria. We don't need to travel out of the country.
Of course. Okay, I'm going to be very direct with my questions. Most Nigerian youths or most young persons do not even think of agriculture. Most persons, white-collar jobs. But you have been able to diversify. You are educated, but you have been able to diversify. The diversification seems to be the problem for many Nigerian youths. Why do you think they are not taking full advantage of this?
Thank you. Let me take it this way. Even the code of conduct in Nigeria says you can farm, even life after service. Why can't we embrace that now? No, what I'm saying is our life being in a life the way we are, we need something to eat. We need food in our tables. Either the white-collar job or no white-collar job, you must have something on the table for people to see that, yes, you are eating that and give you life. There is wealth in it, and there is more opportunity in agriculture. Luckily for me, I choose what we call the fishery, the aquaculture, and I've been making weight for me. Who say you cannot? The protein there is another source of income. The farming itself is another source of income. The waterways in the fish farming is another source of income. That everything can work well when you are so focused, determined, and you know what you are doing right. Imagine what I have on ground. I'm able to change the narrative about fish farming. And if I can have 7 over million fish, you can imagine, it's not enough for Nigerians. So youth out there, that you are there thinking about this white-collar job, if I have opportunity when I'm old and I'm gone, that I could come back to this world, I still want to become a fisherman. And that's it.
Of course. Now tell us, it might seem very easy. What are the challenges you face as a fish farmer?
Yes, there are a lot of challenges, but you can manage it because there is nothing in this life that has no challenges. Of course, light. Of course, the petrol, the cost in productions. But the more the cost move higher, the more the cost of the products go higher in the markets. So, and the woman factors, because you can't have it all. Because when you have over 120 or 150 workers working with you, all cannot be faithful. There's woman factors that can cause that. There are technical factors that can cause that. But importantly, in agriculture, when we talk about fish farming, there is no loss. When you are so determined and focused about it, you can get it right.
No loss in agri.
No loss. Any loss, okay, for example, when we talk about loss in fish farming, the small fish has many factors. It enriches a lot. I believe there should be an anarchy. You need to say that 50 or 40% should be for white-collar jobs, and the remaining one should go into entrepreneurs. There is money in agriculture. The richest man in the whole world are agricultures. There's one man in this country, if I mention him, everybody knows him, he's ventured into agriculture. I want to mention the name of Dangote himself. But this man's making more money. You listening to me or watching me now, why can't you start what we call agricultural impacts, entrepreneur? The water itself can also create an impact to make money. The broken fish alone can also create an impact to make money. There's no any medical that says you can't eat fish to the old age. From 40 upward, from 35 forward, you can eat fish. The market of fish farming is very wide. Very
wide. Now, what could be the problem? Why are our youths not cashing in? What seems to be the problem? Yes. Is it lack of interest?
Lack of interest, as you said, but then where you are not determined and you just want to make money, you can't make it one day. Getting to the ladder where you can stand today, like where I'm standing, you start from the grassroots. Just like I mentioned, I came as a copper to Plateau State. So you need to take the energy. You need to take the bull by the horn. You need to move to the pond. You need to move to the success ground. Success just don't come in the way. Success have a lot of great opportunity for you to move on. That is why we call B a businessman. If you are not B, you can't be a businessman. A B means something that's giving you sweetness, but you can't go to where the bees gather and want to go and pick it. It will stink you. You must be very rigid. You must be very determined that yes, I want to make money. For example, you are putting up maybe 1 million fish. Imagine you are selling them at a cost what they are selling a kg in the market now, 3,500 or 3,000. That's over 3.5 billion. 3.5 billion naira. Imagine you have over 10,000. There is money in fish farming. Youth out there, please, I'm begging you, great opportunity like this. Start somewhere. Even if it's 500 fishes, you can start. You can train people to be into fish farming. We need to train our youth. Youth need to hold this bone by the horn and make money in fish farming. I was so happy, as I said, the Ministry of Livestock is a great opportunity for youth, even the retiree, to embark on what we call fishery. There is wealth and there is money in fish farming.
Okay, I'm impressed by your story, but really, taking that bold decision during your service here, it's something every youth out there should emulate.
Yes, training has to be in board.
Okay.
When there's a training, you need to engage youth in training. Even the, what's it called, at the service, at the youth corporate end, there should be a platform where you can train. Even in a community, there should be a section for you to train and entrain. A train might be 1 week, might be 2 weeks. Then they can now start with empowerment. Train them on how you can smoke your fish, how you can, produce your own fingerlings, your own juveniles, what kind of pond treatment, the drugs, all these need to be trained. When you train it, you can now start seeing that it's just like you are traveling to, let's say, to Abuja. You see many things on the road before getting to the destinations. So also fish farming also be that way. How is the quality of the water? How is the quality of human factor that will manage what we call the fish farming? How do you get to the market? How do you make individual, get to this market and people know about this business and you can sell and make money? I want to always say this. Nigeria is blessed. If 90% of our youth can embase on what we call agriculture, 1. 2, aquaculture, believe me, you sir, there is money. No wonder the 50 naira, what is there in 50 naira is catfish. Then in olden days, before the oil, where we have in Nigeria now to make money, is agriculture. I rather develop my community. I rather develop Nigeria. That is where every corner when we talk about agriculture is money. Because when you work every day, you need something to take in. And also you need a protein. to balance your diet.
To balance your diet. Dr. Fish, I have to call you Dr. Fish.
Yes,
at
that's
this
the
point.
name. That's the state name, Dr. Fish.
Okay. All right. You know, support is critical because most young persons out there actually want to get rich quickly. They want to get the money, but it is not like that. Success has a step. It is gradual.
Yeah.
How have you been able to navigate the sector, the agri sector?
Wow, a very deep one. There is no success without no stories. You need to start with a step. Training first. After training, then empowerment. After the empowerment, take a step at the others. Maybe starting with 500 fishes. 500 fishes, you look at the marketing. And the marketing, we're talking about 3,000 per one or 3,500 per one fish. Do you know you can even make more than the 3,000 per one of the fishes? If you multiply it and 500, you can get it right. How do you treat the pond? How do you get the water level, the oxygen it needs? How do you get the drugs? How do you feed? What are the steps of the feeding? This I'm talking about training. So if you're able to follow those steps, then you can get it right. Yes, in fish farming, there might be mortalities. I'm talking about the dead fishes. You can't throw them away. You can train one person to treat another person, and we can enrich our youth here in Nigeria. Okay.
Now, support. When you started, were you getting support from family members, friends, or how did you penetrate the government to get support?
This is very funny and very interesting. I say you take the bull by the horn.
Okay.
Support comes from God first. When you depend on someone, you might not get it right. Because when you fall, you want to go back. I have fall over time and I've retreated the time again. Imagine 2004 to this time around, over 21 years. Does it mean I have not faced challenges? Yes. There are times when I produce all that at the same time. But keep me, getting it right. Let's open our eyes very well to see how you can make your, ends meet. It can be your side hustle, even when you're working with federal
government. It should be a side hustle.
Yes, it can be. That's why I say Code of Conduct of Nigeria says you can farm. You can be richer than your salary from the fish farming or for the agriculture. So there are challenges which can be managed by your own end. No matter how managed it is not a waste. Okay. Fish farming, it is not a waste.
Okay, finally to you. It means entrepreneurship is very important, whether you are old or you are young. Any word of advice to our youth out there hoping to engage in farming?
Yes.
Not necessarily fishing.
Yes, good. Start somewhere. You need to take the bull by the horn. You need to wear the shoe of greatness. You need to think about in the next 10 years, where would you be? You need to start thinking, can I venture in agriculture? Or can I move into another way? No matter any step you find yourself in this life, when we talk about life and life, think about the steps ahead of you. More importantly, even when you retire, what do you want to do? The economy is calling for agriculture. It's calling for diversifications. So why would you sit down there? Either you are retired, you are not retired, you are just a young graduate, or you are about to, graduate. You can make an ends meet in agriculture. I keep on crying, and this is my clarion call to Nigeria. Find anywhere around you that you can go for training. Even if it's the federal government or the state government that can take individuals for training, it's a good empowerment. Let's train them and let them be empowered. Youth out there, don't be lazy.
And we have the land, we have the water.
The land is green. The land is open. See, as a fish farmer, even in your compound, you can start any small thing to do. We have what we call tarpaulin pond. We have what we call acting pond. We have what we call about open feed that you can do this business. Nigerians, let's wake up.
Nigerian youth should take cue. Entrepreneurship is very, very lucrative. Let's embrace it. Dr. Adetunji Samuel Adebanjo, I want to thank you so much for enlightening us. Thank you for enlightening Nigerian youths, and we hope they will take cues from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Don't waste time. Start now.
Thank you very much.
That's it on this episode of Insights. Do join us same time next week for more on the program. My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.